Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and online role-playing aficionado. With this video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild adventure Minotaur's Bargain by JVC Perry and Phil Beckwith, designed for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This adventure is included in the recently released bundle Adventure Anthology of PB Publishing. PB Publishing has provided a review copy for the purposes of this review. So Minotaur's Bargain is a mini death trap dungeon crawl designed for a party of 5th level characters with a suggested playtime of 3 to 4 hours. It's relatively tiny compared to PB Publishing's other material, running at only about 12 pages, not including the maps and stat blocks. The adventure hook has your player characters arriving at a Minotaur settlement to seek a potential alliance. Now the Minotaurs here are not your Forgotten Realms monster manual, just kind of generic monsters who happen to be good at roaming labyrinths. These Minotaurs are inspired from specifically fantasy author Richard A. Knack's depictions in the Dragonlance novels, like the Kaz the Minotaur, and there was a whole Minotaur trilogy, which later spun out into a trilogy about ogres, which I absolutely ate up in high school and college. I loved those books, and their Minotaurs were written as this richly cultural tribal warrior race who valued like strength and honor, almost exactly like the orcs of Warcraft. And I believe Knack actually did end up writing a bunch of Warcraft books as well. So very similar in tone and style, and I really dig how the Minotaurs were used in Dragonlance, made them actually really cool rather than just like, you know, another monster. So I was excited to see that specifically in the description for this adventure, that inspiration is taken in writing this adventure. And not only that, but, and you'll see this in my prose at the end, PB Publishing got a foreword written by Richard A. Knack, which is really nifty. You can see here at the beginning that he kind of plugs his own work with Rex Draconis, but definitely writes about how he wrote them in the Dragonlance books, and just what a cool things he's done for Minotaurs in fantasy. So big +1 to having that forward, which is neat. So in the beginning, the PCs have a chance to roleplay with the powerful Minotaur leader, but the results is the same regardless. Now, given the title of the adventure, the fantastic forward by Knack, and what I just mentioned about how it's inspired from this new breed of Minotaur, I was expecting a much more story-heavy, politically driven adventure. Instead, after that initial confrontation where they try to just talk to the Minotaur leader about getting an alliance, the PCs are just dropped into a dungeon full of fairly standard traps. And that's pretty much the end of the role-playing. There's one character at the beginning, but otherwise it's very light on role-playing, very heavy on just navigating through this death trap style dungeon. You're dropped into an arena, but it's like set up like a gauntlet. In fact, I'll switch over to the map. You can see here you start in the lower left and then work your way up, and then there's just 4 different challenge rooms that must be overcome before a 5th and final challenge, a boss fight, opens up. Literally like a portal appears in the 4th room. It feels very video gamey, like a Zelda dungeon or something. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, that's, I love video games. It's a nifty inspiration. It's just not what I was expecting. In the initial room, the PCs are told they can bring only 1 item with them, including clothing, armor, or even like an arcane focus. Oh man, PCs are going to balk at this. There are rules and notes for anyone who wants to try and smuggle in more items, which I don't know where they're hiding them at that point if they're having to take off most of their clothes. This obviously makes everything in the dungeon much deadlier than normal, and frankly, I don't know how well that would go with a lot of players. I mean, it's, to me, stripping the players of their hard-earned like magic items and carefully crafted loot and equipment is tantamount to like knocking them out and capturing them like in a cutscene or something. That's taking a lot of control and power away from players, and it kind of works thematically here as an arena, and that could be cool, but it also feels like it's just artificially making everything more challenging. So the potential ally they can meet in the first room is Partheus. He's written as more of a brief font of information for the challenges ahead. Now, I do love it when the DM gets to add an ally to the party, because it serves as like an organic way of imparting information to the players or acting as like a narrator, like throughout a dungeon or adventure. However, here, and he is depicted as being like young and cowardly, so that's why he's at the entrance and not going forward. It sounds like he's not actually supposed to accompany the players. And obviously, a Minotaur is like a CR5 creature in the monster manual. It does mention that he's only got 30 hit points, so he's supposed to be a weaker one. But I would, simply to make this adventure more, and again, not everything has to have, there's no hard and fast rule where it has to have a certain percentage of role playing, a certain percentage of combat, and all that. But given that the adventure, the inspiration, and all that feels like it wants to use Minotaurs in a cool way, I would definitely want to use this NPC in a much more pronounced manner, in terms of at least maybe the PCs can talk him into joining them on the adventure, and then that can be a cool little character arc where even if the PCs fail the adventure or something, then at least that Minotaur might be inspired to do honorable things. Make that the kind of central story without taking away from the PCs necessarily. Like, they can be the heroes and also help this guy who's kind of a sidekick to them. So I like that he's there, but he's not actually utilized as much as even I would want to use him. In fact, the notes on role-playing him are pretty minimal, because I think he's just supposed to be that information in the beginning. So there's a decent variety of traps here, but nothing particularly awe-inspiring. And that might be because I'm still pawing through, what is the insanity of Death Trap dungeon design of the Tomb of the Nine Gods from Tomb of Annihilation, which just has bananas, traps, and horrible things happen in just about every room. This one is more just kind of standard array of dungeon traps. You've got like ground spikes that shoot up, these spears. There's a room with spinning scythes in it, pressure plates with wall darts. There's a whole room of just like magical traps. There's fire and lightning and floating islands. A 60-foot pool with a darkness spell at the end. The goal in each room is to simply pull a lever to complete the room. You're not actually... So instead of making it from point A to point B, you're just going into a room, finding a way to finding the lever, pulling the lever, and then getting back out. The problem is, I don't see why any spellcaster with like the Mage Hand cantrip, or any of several third-level spells, which is what fifth-level characters have access to, like Fly, or Alter Self, or Gaseous Form, couldn't just complete most rooms without breaking a sweat. Now, it does mention that, spellcasters might have to lose Arcane Focus. I imagine if you were... As a DM, I never cared about Arcane Focus, frankly. It's just you could... or even Material Bags. That was just busy work that I just didn't care to saddle on spellcasters that already had a lot to keep up with. But if you did, then I guess that could be a way to limit them. But again, you're taking away a lot of power. But on the flip side, it does feel like all of these more mechanical-based traps are very susceptible to any spellcaster with like the smallest bit of outside-the-box thinking. There's not a lot of combat here. The spike trap room can potentially hold a random beast. And then in the room with the scythes and pressure plates, there's a single like orc gladiator. And the final room does have a massive, crazy powerful CR8 Minotaur boss with like legendary actions. In fact, let me scoot ahead. By the way, really great artwork here. Look at that. This is fantastic throughout. I think they're like stock images, but still, I mean, it's a good use of them. There we go. This guy, Minotaur Ruderius. Holy crap. He is super beefy. CR8, 150 hit points, 16 armor class, legendary actions. And again, the PCs are probably wounded from all these death trap rooms, and they don't have all of their equipment. So that could be kind of scary at the end. The most interesting feature the dungeon offers is the arena crowd. So you're not in some like underground tomb. You're in a gauntlet-style arena with a cheering or jeering crowd all around you. So if the PCs perform honorable deeds or heroic actions, yeah, here we go, crowd behavior, then the crowd can reward them, and they will literally like reward the PCs with inspiration, or they could even throw out a useful item at the PCs, like a potion of healing. On the flip side, if the heroes act cowardly, or the crowd, or dishonorably, or the crowd notices like they smuggled in an item that they weren't supposed to, too many items, then the crowd will hurl rocks at them, which literally you make attack rolls and deal damage. This is a really cool feature that really drives home the fact that the PCs are proving themselves in an arena instead of just crawling through another, underground dungeon full of traps. And since the PCs are supposed to prove themselves, the outcome can vary depending on their actions. So obviously the goal is for them to complete the dungeon successfully, but if they fail and a total party wipe occurs, and again, that last boss fight looks particularly scary with a near naked group of PCs, They could just be revived and exonerated at the end by the Minotaur's, clerics, and assuming they did perform honorably, then they could still technically win the scenario, even though they might have failed the actual challenge. But that's a neat way of kind of writing around that. The adventure includes a full map of the arena. We can click back here, as well as individual maps for every single room, kind of zoomed in map. Now, I really, as I mentioned this before, and PB Publishing seems to really like this style, I do love that cutaway 3/4 isometric style a lot. It's fun visually to look at. Unfortunately, that style just isn't really functional or usable, viable to use in a virtual tabletop like Roll20. So you could still use these pictures as DM guides or even handouts to your players if you wanted to, but if you wanted to actually use them for like tokens or miniatures or whatever, you would have to rebuild this dungeon. Thankfully, it's not very big or complex or elaborate, so it wouldn't be that hard to do that, but that is something to keep in mind for the crowd that uses the virtual tabletop. So for a one-shot Death Trap dungeon, Minotaur's Bargain is serviceable, offering some interesting challenges and a neat feature with the arena crowd. It is quite short and doesn't really fully utilize the Minotaurs themselves. There's not even a maze. There's not a lot of role-playing with this cool new breed of, not new, I guess. It was like kind of popularized in the 90s and early 2000s by Knack, but I just don't feel like it uses that promise of what the description said and what like the forward by Knack and all that in terms of the Minotaurs being this cool warrior culture-rich race, and then it's just a Death Trap dungeon. Like you get that one little role-playing scene at the beginning, which turns out to not really mean much, and then the one potential ally NPC, which I feel is underutilized given again how much I think there's just a lot of wasted potential here. I feel like now. The adventure is designed as part one of a trilogy of adventures on the DM's Guild by PB Publishing. And by the way, you'll be seeing my review of the second one, which is included in this adventure anthology soon here on YouTube and on my website at roguewatson.com. I am hoping the other adventures do a better job of exploring Minotaurs from a more interesting role-playing and political perspective for sure. So, quick prose. For the Minotaur's Bargain. Prose, the arena crowd is a neat feature with well-integrated mechanics. I love the way that's designed both aesthetically with flavoring and actual functional in-game mechanics. I like rewarding players mechanically for things they've done with role-playing, which is a big reason why 5th edition is great, because Inspiration is absolutely perfect for that. And even in addition to that, they get Inspiration plus other goodies, which is fantastic. There's really great art throughout there. I love, obviously, the stock art is fantastic, but I also really enjoy the artwork of the map, even though it's not entirely functional, but I still like the way that isometric design looks. And other I really like the foreword by one of my favorite authors, whom I really need to read more of his stuff. I think it's been probably a decade since I've actually read any of it, but by Richard A. Knack. Really cool that they got that in there. Cons, role-playing is limited to the very beginning, and the PCs are thrown into the arena regardless. And again, not every adventure needs to have a heavy amount or any amount of role-playing, but I just feel like that was just a wasted opportunity here with how cool the Minotaurs can be. The challenge difficulty feels artificially enhanced due to stripping the PCs down of most of their equipment. I'm not a fan of that system of penalizing the PCs or making something more challenging, even though it does kind of make sense given the arena format. The traps and levers and just the whole thing feels particularly susceptible to PC spellcasters. There's a lot of third-level spells that can just break the way these puzzle rooms are set up. And finally, the isometric maps, while lovely, again, they're not really compatible with virtual tabletops like Roll20, unfortunately. So my final verdict, the Minotaur's Bargain offers some neat features in its Death Trap dungeon, but fails to really utilize Minotaurs in a meaningful way. So thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com and follow our own tabletop RPG adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.